Christians were being discriminated against at the federal level, according to a new report. This is the conclusion of a new report from the Trump administration, which is investigating policies and how they impacted people of faith. Meanwhile, Americans are being told to expect more raids on businesses that have been hiring illegal aliens. This follows a recent raid that found 300 illegal aliens from South Korea working at a Hyundai factory in Georgia. And on another topic, President Donald Trump has given the military broad powers to respond if Venezuela puts American ships in danger. I'll be talking about these topics and more today. I'm the Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip, and you're listening to Crossroads. Welcome to Crossroads. Christians were being discriminated against at the federal level, according to a new report that just came out. And some of the conclusions, well, they're pretty revealing. This is the conclusion of a new report from the Trump administration, and they investigated policies, mostly under the Biden administration, and how they were impacting people of faith. The Daily Signal says this: an initial report from the Task Force to Eradicate Anti-Christian Bias says the Biden administration engaged in, quote, disfavored treatment and viewpoint discrimination, harassment, weaponized prosecutions, and other biased behavior towards Christians. It says the report points to government-wide examples of this anti-Christian bias, including a finding that the Biden administration allowed a hospital to, quote, violate employee conscious rights by, it says, forcing staff to participate in abortion against their consciences, presumably forcing them to do it or they'd potentially lose their jobs or something. Further in, it says, following instructions from Attorney General Pam Bondi, the report incorporates detailed assessments from government agencies describing their findings of bias and steps taken or planned to counter that bias. And its other findings include a report from the State Department that the agency stigmatized employees for religious objections to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, requiring them to turn over highly personal information and then publicly shaming and humiliating them. It says the State Department also found that under President Joe Biden, the agency targeted Christian homeschool parents who were federal employees with Inspector General investigations, IRS referrals, and threats of criminal charges and disciplinary action. In other words, a lot more than just naming and shaming, a lot more than just threatening, actually going after them using legal means. Now, on this point, this was an initial report obtained by Fox News on Friday. Although it was just released, at least leaked to Fox, it was dated June 6, meaning it's a bit dated. They're probably further along in the full investigations. The full report on this, it's not out yet. The Trump administration put a deadline on that for February 2026. So, we'll find out what else has been going on. So far, though, the report says that Christians in particular were mistreated under the Biden administration, but it also says this wasn't limited to them. It includes people of faith overall. It says the evidence uncovered is unmistakable. During the Biden administration, people of faith, particularly Christians, were repeatedly subjected to anti-religious bias at the hands of their own government. The American government, under the previous administration, was carrying out various forms of suppression of faith. That's what's coming out now. That's a massive deal. And the Trump administration, they're, of course, trying to repair that. They're trying to set it right because that's one of the core things America stands for. Even beyond freedom of speech, even beyond the Second Amendment and right to defend yourself, the pillar of the United States is and has always been religious freedom, the freedom to believe. And everything else is built on top of that. Now, it also says that Attorney General Pam Bondi and the task force, while they're setting out to end this pattern of religious abuse, they want to fix it. And it says the task force will never permit the federal government to be used as a weapon against faith, as it was. So they're fixing it now, trying to. Now, on that point also, President Donald Trump addressed the task force, and he suggested that while Americans, they can acknowledge some faiths are widely regarded as, being persecuted. And we should condemn religious discrimination on those faiths. But maybe When we say it's wrong to criticize one or attack one, maybe we should expand that to other faiths as well.
And I created the first ever Department of Justice task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And for those people that are a little bit naive or not well-read, there is a tremendous anti-Christian bias. We don't hear about it. We don't think about it. You hear about anti-Semitic, but you don't hear about anti-Christian. Now, you have a strong anti-Christian bias, but we're ending that rapidly, I will tell you. We're in a much different world today than we were 1 year ago. This is like a different world.
That's an interesting point because, there are names for people and very damaging labels who discriminate against people of certain faiths. As Trump notes, you can say anti-Semitism, and it's a damning label. That label can really ruin your reputation. The media also has things like Islamophobia, and of course that's a very damaging label. If someone gets hit with that, it can really destroy their career and damage their reputation. But if somebody is anti-Christian, do they also face, repercussions for it? Is that a bad thing in our society? Is that something you could, have your reputation damaged for? It seems that has not been the case, actually. It seems that certain types of discrimination, certain types of abuse have been allowed. And why is that? Well, we may get some answers on this as the investigation goes forward. Now, on that front, also, a big part of discrimination against people of faith had to do with religious exemptions to vaccine mandates. I interviewed a lot of soldiers on this, a lot of people in the Air Force in particular, airmen. And it turns out that many people did believe that they were being discriminated against for their faith when they were forced to get a shot they didn't believe in. Now, in the military, this was a very, very big issue. And there was a huge victory on that front relating to an Air Force pilot. Just the News said this. It says the Air Force found that a pilot who faced separation from the military for requesting a religious exemption to the flu vaccine was discriminated against for his religion and should not have been reprimanded. It says Major Brennan Shillreport, who has served in the Air Force for 17 years and was a whistleblower of the COVID-19 vaccine, can now request the military branch give him back pay and restore his flight status after he was reprimanded when his religious accommodation request, the RAR, was not processed. That was a very common thing. I personally spoke to many pilots, many airmen in particular, Navy SEALs who were dealing with this. The Navy SEALs especially were very strong on this front. Many people had religious exemptions for, the shots. They didn't agree with them. And many of them were forced to get it, or not only them, but even their families were targeted. In some cases, they were telling me, actually, even their family members were punished. You can't see your dad for the holidays type thing. Many of them did regard that as a type of religious persecution because, again, in the United States, we have freedom of belief, and that doesn't mean you have to be part of an established faith. It doesn't mean that, it's what your pastor or your priest says. You're allowed to have your own interpretation. You're allowed to interpret your faith as you will, and your interpretation of your faith is regarded as protected belief in the United States. If your protected faith says you should not get these kinds of shots, if your protected faith says you don't support anything that may have even, potentially been used with experimentation on aborted fetuses or fetal parts, that is protected belief. And in America, they're not allowed to discriminate against that. That was a big debate, of course, over the last several years. This new case is pretty pivotal on determining where it's going to go. Now, look, on to another topic. More business raids are coming in the name of mass deportations, and it's not even just aimed at illegal immigrants from Latin America. The ones talked about the most, it's others as well. This follows a recent raid that found over 300 illegal aliens working at a Hyundai factory in Georgia. And these were 300 illegal aliens from South Korea. In total, the raid actually led to the arrest by ICE of 475 people at the electric battery plant that's still under construction. And now, immigration authorities are saying, get used to it because a lot more like this are going to be happening. Fox News said Trump administration border czar Tom Homan vowed more workplace immigration enforcement operations on Sunday, similar to the Georgia Hyundai plant raid that detained hundreds last week. It says when asked by CNN's Jake Tapper if the Trump administration would pursue similar raids in the future, Homan said they would continue. The short answer, Homan said, is yes. We're going to do more worksite enforcement operations because, number one, it's a crime to enter this country illegally. Number two, it's a crime to knowingly hire an illegal alien. And these companies that hire illegal aliens, they undercut the competition that's paying U.S. citizens' salaries. Now, I would point to this. This is a huge issue. Many people have questioned, well, why is the Trump administration not making it a crime to knowingly hire an illegal alien? It used to be in the United States that if you were an employer and you were hiring illegal aliens, you would face punishment. It was a big deal. For the most part, that has not been the case for a long time in the United States. Workplaces hire illegal aliens all the time. They don't face any kind of repercussions for it. The illegal aliens they don't really face repercussions either. And that's been how it's been done for quite a while now. But it used to be the case, it was a crime. It was a crime to hire them. And what Tom Homan is saying here, quote, this is his quote, it's a crime to knowingly hire an illegal alien. And that's a big, big point because that does suggest that maybe they're regarding it as a crime yet again. It wasn't for a long time. It seems to bring it back. He added this as well, quote, look, no one hires illegal aliens on the goodness of their heart. They hire them because they work them harder, pay them less, and undercut the competition, Homan added. And on that point also, many people who defend hiring illegal aliens often defend it on you pay them a lot less money. And they're saying, well, unless you want to pay more for goods, you got to hire illegal aliens because they work for less money. Now, in response to the recent raid, the South Korean government actually reached out to the Trump administration to secure the release of the illegal workers. They're even sending officials to the U.S. over this. They're apologizing to the United States. They're taking it very seriously. South Korea's presidential office even secured a plane to bring these people back to South Korea by themselves. They're actually taking this very seriously. Part of that, of course, is because they don't want to get on the bad side of the Trump administration right now. Now, in response to this, President Donald Trump himself also issued a statement on Truth Social. He said this, following the immigration enforcement operation of the Hyundai battery plant in Georgia, I am hereby calling on all foreign companies investing in the United States to please respect our nation's immigration laws. Your investments are welcome, and we encourage you to legally bring your very smart people with great technical talent to build world-class products, and we will make it quickly and legally possible for you to do so. What we ask in return, Trump says, is that you hire and train American workers. Hire and train American workers. In other words, not bring over your own people, not hire illegal aliens, and again, not do something that doesn't benefit the United States. He said, quote, together, we will all work hard to make our nation not only productive, but closer in unity than ever before. Now, that's a very big deal. This ties into Trump's push to bring factories back to the United States. That's his big kind of underlying agenda with a lot of his policies right now. He wants to rebuild American production. That's the opening he's also giving to other countries to avoid paying tariffs. If they don't want to pay high tariffs, you have an option. Bring your factory to the United States. And as Trump notes here, well, even just bringing your factories back to the United States are not enough. He wants you to build the factories here and then hire Americans, and especially not hire illegal aliens when they do it. Now, look, speaking of deportations also, the Department of Homeland Security is now launching ICE operations in Illinois. They're stationing ICE officers at Navy Station Great Lakes. That's a military base outside of Chicago. That's a big deal because they were putting up ICE in hotels and stuff. Protesters were going outside the hotels, making noise all night, keeping them up, intimidating them, blocking them, threatening them. And then, of course, that forced Trump's hand to deploy guards to defend them, to protect them from the crowds. They're putting them on military bases now. That's also important because it suggests that ICE is operating out of military bases, which means that they can operate, carrying out deportations and so on, without help from the local government. DHS said this on X. It says, DHS is launching Operation Midway Blitz in honor of Katie Abraham, who was killed in a drunk driving hit-and-run car wreck caused by criminal illegal alien Julio Cusilbo in Illinois. It says this ICE operation will target the criminal illegal aliens who flocked to Chicago and Illinois because they knew Governor Pritzker and his sanctuary policies, they say, would protect them and allow them to roam free on American streets. Now, in response to that, Governor Pritzker said, writing on X, quote, "Once again, this is not about fighting crime. That requires support and coordination, yet we've experienced nothing like that over the past several weeks. Instead of taking steps to work with us on public safety, the Trump administration's focused on scaring Illinoisians." My personal take on this, look, I think what Trump is doing, I think this could be the first step to deploying the National Guard to Chicago as well. Because remember, this is how it works, right? The National Guard can be deployed to fight crime and deal with other problems, to an extent. They can be deployed by the president if their role is to protect federal agents or federal buildings. So what does Trump need to do to force the hand of needing the National Guard to protect federal agents? Well, you deploy federal agents like ICE. If ICE can do its job without pushback, if he sends them there and there's no pushback and nobody blocking them or reporting them, nobody trying to protest against them, nobody threatening them, then it all might end there. But that's probably not what's going to happen because that's not what ever happens. People will probably block them. If they do block them, especially if there are protests or riots or people trying to stop them or report them or threaten them, it is possible Trump could respond to that by expanding the deployment of the National Guard, because that's also something he's pushing for. In fact, after D.C., he was saying it might be Illinois next, Chicago in particular. He's also talking about Portland very seriously right now. This could be the door he needs open to deploy the National Guard. And, again, they can't really carry out law enforcement per se. There's a lot of back and forth on this also. Notably, Los Angeles, they overturned Trump's ability to do that. They recently won it back. So Trump does have the ability to deploy the National Guard now more broadly, and the LA model could be used across the entire United States. Not only that, it's also been determined now that ICE can put up checkpoints. They can have checkpoints. And if you have checkpoints and the National Guard guarding ICE agents, well, it's like Red Robin. Nobody gets through, right? Now, on another topic, President Donald Trump has given the military very broad powers to respond, quote unquote, meaning maybe fight them, if Venezuela strikes a U.S. ship, if they do anything dangerous, put American lives at risk. This comes amid a very large U.S. military deployment to the Caribbean, which the Venezuelan regime is saying is America preparing for war. Venezuela now is also deploying its own military. They're saying, two sides of this. On one side, they're saying it's a response to the United States. On the other side, they're saying this is anti-drug operations, because the whole underlying picture of this is, of course, the Trump administration going after the drug cartels. Notably, they regard Venezuela's leader as the leader of a drug cartel. Now, this is Donald Trump speaking about the new deployment during a White House press briefing.
Venezuela flies jets over U.S. naval vessels again.
Well, I would say they're going to be in trouble. We'll let them know about that. We heard that happen, but it wasn't really over, not like they described. But I would say, General, if they do that, you have a choice of doing anything you want, okay? If they fly in a dangerous position, I would say that you can, you or your captains can make the decision as to what they want to do, all right? Sure.
Sir, how close did they get, Mr. President? You said they didn't go over.
Say it?
How close did they get? You said the planes did not.
Well, I don't want to talk about that, but if they do put us in a dangerous position, they'll be shut down. Thank you very much, everybody.
So it's up to the generals or their captains on how they respond. And as Trump says, quote, anything you want, meaning fight back in whatever way you find necessary. Although, as Trump says plainly, if Venezuelan planes actually do put U.S. military in a dangerous position, the planes will be shot down. Now, an important note on that, he's not just saying, if they fire at American ships. He's saying if they even put our troops in a dangerous position, the American military has the right to shoot down the Venezuelan planes. And that's a big deal because as the U.S. is carrying these operations there, Venezuela actually did fly fighter jets over the U.S. naval ships. Now, along with the rising tensions between the United States and Venezuela, also the Chinese Communist Party seems to be getting involved in that region as well. And it's also sending a Navy ship to American waters. First Post said this: China dispatched a naval hospital ship to the South Pacific and Latin America regions, long considered part of the United States' strategic backyard, for a mission combining medical outreach and cultural diplomacy, according to a Newsweek report. Briefly, again, they're sending a medical ship. That's a military ship. They're doing it in a way that's for propaganda. They're saying, look, America's here to fight, but we're here to help. That's the narrative the CCP is sending. Also on that front, the CCP mislabels a lot of its ships. For example, it takes Navy fighter ships, naval warships, and then writes Coast Guard on the side and calls them Coast Guard ships. They just relabel their stuff. Now, it notes as well the launch of this deployment known as Mission Harmony, because they're offering peace and harmony, right? That's the narrative. Peace and harmony, Mission Harmony 2025 comes as U.S. military pressure mounts in Venezuela, intensifying geopolitical tensions. And of course, while the CCP is putting up this image of peace, it's the main force maintaining a lot of wars. It's also the main force trying to spark new wars. The Chinese Communist Party openly wants to start wars in Russia, the Middle East, Latin America, and then it wants to invade Taiwan. Notably, the orders on this, the plans of this happened before the Russia-Ukraine war and before the Hamas attack on Israel, the October 7th attack. And so the Chinese Communist Party has been stirring the pot with these fires for a very long time. Now, it notes this, though. Scheduled stops for these Chinese naval ship include Nauru, Fiji, Tonga, Mexico, Jamaica, Barbados, Brazil, Peru, Chile, and Papua New Guinea. Notably, in some of these areas as well, like Papua New Guinea, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to expand policing operations through the Ministry of Public Security. Notably, the Ministry of Public Security is the one that operates the secret Chinese police stations. The CCP is trying to expand its control beyond just its normal borders. Now, on the point of Venezuela also, though, this goes a lot deeper. The Chinese Communist Party has very deep roots in Venezuela. A while back now, several years back, when there were large-scale protests in Venezuela, before Maduro, retook power and Biden called him the unofficial leader of the country, before all that happened and the country was destabilized, it wasn't clear in which way they were going to go. The Chinese Communist Party and Russia intervened in the upheaval in Venezuela. America almost got involved as well. And when America was looking to get involved, the Chinese Communist Party threatened war against the United States. Almost no media reported it. The Chinese Communist Party threatened to go to war with the United States if we intervened in Venezuela. Venezuela is one of the key footprints of the Chinese Communist Party in the Americas, right? South America in this case. Venezuela is one of the main bases, one of the main hubs of the Chinese Communist Party to project power within that region. They're trying to turn Brazil into that as well, especially with Lula in power. For a very long time, they've also, to an extent, had Cuba. Although Cuba, it's also very pro-Russia still. And so the Chinese Communist Party has a lot of interest in Venezuela. A potential war with the United States and Venezuela there is a big deal. And also because Venezuela now claims ownership over Guyana, which is just north of it, and found one of the largest oil reserves in the world, which the United States, American oil companies have some rights over, but the CCP has been trying to control. And then Venezuela laid claim to the entire country, claiming they historically own it in much the same way the CCP laid claim to like Taiwan and the entire South China Sea. Now, this also comes alongside a few other key things. Venezuelan leader Maduro, he's being accused of being the leader of the cartel of the Suns. And the CCP, of course, being the main supplier of precursor chemicals for, again, drugs, methamphetamine, other drugs, being, of course, the main supplier of things like fentanyl and carfentanil and other synthetic drugs. The Chinese Communist Party also being one of the main forces allowing for money laundering within the international financial system. A lot of it goes through the Bank of China. The Chinese Communist Party is basically the kingpin of the cartels throughout Latin America, including the Mexican cartels. And so the CCP's ties with the cartel of the Suns and Maduro, well, that's a big deal. Maduro is being accused of being involved in the shipping of drugs to the United States, and cartels now designated as terrorist organizations are being attacked. The U.S. military just bombed and then published the video of them doing it, of a drug smuggling ship leaving Venezuela, allegedly being piloted by members of the gang Tren de Aragua. The U.S. government put a $50 million reward on Maduro's head. And it's a big, big deal right now. Also, one other point, the United States is also now talking about launching deep strikes into Mexico against the Mexican drug cartels. The Mexican government so far is relatively supporting the United States. They're very much against this. They're also challenging the United States, especially the country's president, challenging the United States on labeling Maduro the leader of the cartel of the Suns. It's complicated in Mexico because a lot of their government is tied with the cartels. It's very hard to do anything in Mexico against the cartels because, they kill any official who doesn't work with them. The United States, on the Trump side, they were actually threatening government officials all throughout Latin America because they know this. Trump's message when he was on the campaign trail to the governments throughout Latin America, not just Mexico, not just Venezuela, was this: the United States is going to put an end to the drug cartels. We will go after them. We will designate them as enemies of the United States. Trump said we will use the entire force of the military. He went through and labeled every single part of the military he's going to deploy against the cartels. Military intelligence, naval blockades, special operations forces, raids, naval strikes, air strikes, drone strikes. And he said that if any government official in any part of Latin America tries to stop him, he will expose the ties of that government official to the cartels. Because unfortunately, most of them are tied to the cartels in one way or another, because the cartels basically are so prominent and have been able to run for so long, it's very hard to get into power if you don't have those ties. Trump threatened to expose them if they dare to stop him. And as we're watching now, Trump is carrying, and again, you could argue whether you think it's real or not, whether he's just threatening to publish whatever, but he's moving forward with it. He's doing right now exactly what he said he would do on the campaign trail. The next step is deep strikes into Mexico. They're now talking about doing this. And the big question right now is, well, are we going to also go to war with the entire Venezuelan military? They do have Russian armaments. The Venezuelan military previously, before Maduro, before Chavez and so on, used to be a very strong U.S. ally. Going back earlier, they actually were partly built up by the United States. The problem they have is the military equipment they have is basically like Cold War era. They haven't really moved beyond it. And military technology has come a long way since then. And it might not be that hard for the United States to just wipe them out if they want to. We'll see where this goes. We'll see how bad it gets. The other problem you're going to have, though, is with the cartels being labeled as terrorist organizations. And of course, the cartels having a lot of access within the United States, the cartels also being involved in assassinations. The other question is, will they be activated like terror cells? My personal take on this is probably not. The reason is motivation. What motivates the cartels? Money. What motivates most other terrorist organizations? Ideology. If your motivation is ideology, you might be willing to die for an ideology. If your motivation is money, dying defeats the purpose of dying for it. I don't think the cartels would die for money. And so I don't believe they will be able to do that as they would with a normal sleeper cell or a normal terrorist group. But we shall see. That said, everyone, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Before we jump into that, though, we have something big going on. I'm going to be speaking at 2 events in San Diego. One, in actual San Diego, one in Orange County. If you want to check out these events, if you want to come and hang out and go to them, go to the website epochsd.com, epochsd.com, epochsd.com. I'll be speaking at 2 events, talking about the Chinese Communist Party's hidden war against the United States and into our communities, including what I've been discovering over the years investigating this. It'll be a live event in person. I'll do a live Q&A if you want to come ask questions. It'll be, pretty personal event. If you're in San Diego or Orange County, come and join the event. The first event in San Diego is going to be on Wednesday, September 24th. The second event is in Orange County. That's going to be Thursday, September 25th. Again, the website for that, epochsd.com, epochsd.com. And you can find more details on that, again, at that website. Check it out. Bring a friend. If you want to bring a friend, they have a deal right now. You can bring a friend for free. And if you go, I look forward to seeing you. So, yeah, coming up pretty soon. A little over a week now, right? 2 weeks now. That said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. Let's see, JNS 1970. You're saying illegals in the UK are claiming millions of pounds for the conditions they had to live in for a period of time after arriving in the country. They were claiming that in the United States too. You had people coming to the US being like, hey, this free hotel you're giving me is not nice enough. The free food you're giving me is not good enough. How dare you feed me like a peasant, America? I know they're doing the same thing in Europe as well. They're like, hey, this free apartment you're giving me is not up to my standards. How dare you not give me good enough free stuff? Unfortunately, that's the nature of the kinds of, mass migration. Yeah, it's the kind of people you're bringing in through mass migration. There's always an issue of what you promise people. I think actually, we used to get very different types of immigrants. Okay, let's talk about the UK first, right? People say the United Kingdom brought it upon itself through colonialism. Look, you guys were in, India, and you kind of created Pakistan because you divided India, and then you were in Jamaica and all these other, parts of Africa. You guys were everywhere. It used to be that you did get a lot of immigrants from those countries. In the UK, you had a lot of Sikhs. You did bring in a lot of people from Pakistan. When the UK was having economic problems in the 80s, right? They actually brought in a lot of foreign workers from Jamaica, which is where a lot of the black population in the UK came from. But the people they brought over, they weren't promised free handouts. They were promised jobs. They were saying, okay, if you want to come work, we'll let you come here and work. And I think for the most part, the people you brought during those times actually did become productive members of society. I'm not super black and white on migration. I don't think all migration is bad. But I do think the type of thing you promise them changes the type of people you attract. If you're promising people freedom, as America used to do, if you promise, that's one thing. If you promise people jobs, that's another thing. That's why we have visa programs and stuff, where you're using the visas as tools to make sure that when they come here, they're here to work. And if they don't work, hey, time to go home because you're not working. That's the purpose of your visa. The United States brought a lot of people from other countries fleeing, communist abuses, especially during the Cold War. We got a lot of people like that. A lot of people we attracted in the United States were people seeking freedom. And, again, that what you seek, what you're being promised, is what you're going to value. I think it worked out for us. A lot of people we brought from Cuba, a lot of people we brought from the former Soviet Union, they were very hardworking people. I'd actually even say that a lot of, illegal immigration from Mexico, like, I used to work with those guys. I used to work in the restaurant business. I've worked in construction. I've worked with a lot of illegal immigrants from Mexico. All the ones I ever worked with were very hardworking people, because what they used to be promised was, you work hard, you can build a life here. And that's the kind of people we got. If your promise changes from we will give you freedom and you can succeed or fail and that's up to you, or we'll give you jobs like the UK did for a lot of those countries, great. But if you promise them, we're going to take care of you, we're going to let you live off the government, come here, you never have to work again. And I know Europe's having a big problem with that right now. A lot of people who come in illegally, I guess technically it's not illegal for you all because it's kind of allowed, right? I don't think they're really defined as illegal immigrants in most of Europe. They call them migrants because the government there mostly regards it as migration, right? And I'm just going by the legal definitions, right, in terms of how they regard it. If you're promising people, come here and we'll take care of you, those are the kinds of people you're going to attract. You're going to get people who don't want to work. You're going to get people who want to live off the system. You're going to get people who feel they're entitled to that you owe them that. And if you don't give them enough, they're going to say, hey, this isn't what I was promised. They're going to say, I was promised more than this. I was promised luxury life. I was promised, no work ever for the rest of my life or for my children. I was promised free food and free school and free health care, and that I could just live off your people, right? If that's what you're promising them, those are the kinds of people you're going to get. And that's what's happening. Now, again, on that point, I'm not like black and white on immigration. I do think there are good forms of immigration. Actually, I was in the UK last year, a year and a half ago. I really liked the UK, actually. It sounds funny, but I actually have good family friends in the UK. Most of my friends there are Muslim. So I have friends in the Pakistani community. When I went and stayed in the UK last time, we have a good friend who works in Parliament, actually pretty good position. And, her family's from Pakistan, we got good Pakistani food. One of my other good friends there, he grew up didn't even own shoes in Pakistan. Very hardworking guy. He's a teacher at one of your universities. I think one of the big universities. I can't remember which one. But great guy. He's very pro-America. He wears a cowboy hat. He drives a muscle car. he had it brought there. The hardworking people, in other words. And so that's my experience with those communities, right? My experience is probably not totally representative, but that's my experience in those communities. I know it's not all like that. Ashley from California, you're saying, with illegals taking jobs, there's less money for the citizens to spend because they have a harder time finding work and wages are brought down by other companies to compete. So the argument of illegal workers helping keep costs down is flawed. That's totally true. And I know a lot of people who've experienced this. So this is back to the point. I should make a caveat to the previous point I made, where people coming for hard work is always a good thing. The other problem you're having now is you have people coming from those other countries and they do want to work here, but they want higher pay than Americans get. They believe they are entitled to crazy high pay. I know guys who work in construction, who go, you used to go to Home Depot, and ICE goes to Home Depot now because they know this. But you used to go to Home Depot and there'd be the guys standing outside, looking for work. It used to be they were saying, please, I just want to work. And, you pay a minimum wage. And look, they're illegal workers. What do you want to do, right? Give them minimum wage. They want a minimum wage. They don't have tools. They don't have cars. They often don't have very good skills. Usually the most they could do is they could be helpers. So you teach them a basic task and they can do that basic task. They're not going to be like a normal contractor where they can do everything, right? If they do it by their standards, and their standards are a lot different from ours. That used to be how it was. Totally changed now. I know guys now who go there, and you'll go to talk to someone, and the guy will push forward, and he'll say, hey, these are my guys. If you want to hire them, you need to pay them $30, $35 an hour. You need to give them lunch. You need to drive them, and you need to pay me. And basically gangs have taken it over. Gangs have taken it over, like a mafia. You know, they call themselves unions, but they're like a gang, right? This is why you have these Tren de Aragua guys getting arrested, by the way, and MS-13 guys getting arrested, you know, hanging out with those workers outside Home Depot. It's because gangs are running the show now because we've let it happen for so long. And so what happens is this. You hire the guy. I know guys recently, I'm talking like the last few months, and I won't name names, but I talk to guys, I talk to people all the time, you know, I get out, right? I know someone who was telling me they hired, you know, an illegal immigrant outside one of these stores. He gives the guy, I think he gave him $30 an hour, $30 an hour, right? The guy didn't bring his own lunch, doesn't have his own tools, doesn't have his own car, and he's an illegal immigrant, and he's an okay worker, he's not that great. Gives him $30 an hour, gives him his pay at the end of the day, cash, and the guy gives my friend this disgusted look and starts throwing a fit, like, is that all you're giving me? Like the guy wanted more money. And, you know, the guy I know, like, he's not going to put up with that. He's like, you're lucky you're getting good pay. You should be grateful to me. You should be grateful. Not throwing a fit and trying to shame me for paying you $30 an hour. And then, you know, you imagine if it's like, wasn't my friend, but like an old lady or something like that. Yeah, they're going to give the guy more because he's throwing a hissy fit. Like, those are the kinds of people you're getting now. You're getting entitled jerks. Frankly, entitled jerks who believe that this country owes them. You're not getting people who are friendly. You're not getting people who are, you know, grateful. You're not getting people who respect us. You're getting entitled jerks in many cases. And I know people dealing with it. It's terrible. What people are dealing with is terrible with it. You know, they drinking and driving afterwards. They don't care. It's like, it's horrible. You know, it's all kinds of stuff like that. Another question, Kathleen White, you're saying, isn't China in Venezuela for oil? Partly. China does a lot of Belt and Road Initiative stuff throughout Latin America. So part of it is oil. Part of it is timber. It's all natural resources. They're there for timber, right? The trees. They do a lot of logging. They do mining. So a lot of the the natural resources. Oil is a big part of it. They're also doing some rare earth mining operations. So the CCP, they also do farming. So the CCP, through the Belt and Road Initiative, what they do, they go to these countries and they get them in debt traps. Let's say the CCP, a Chinese Communist Party official, goes to Venezuela. For a certain project, they bring $10 million. I'm just giving like a hypothetical here. They bring $10 million. 10% of that is going to be for bribery. So $10 million for the project. They find out who makes the call. They give the guy $1 million, maybe not even under the table. They could just these countries, they just like hand it to you. You know what I mean? Here's $1 million. Make sure we get the deal, right? The official in that country backstabs their own country and gives the CCP the best deal in the world that screws over their entire country in the long term. Because what happens is this. Part of the deal is the Chinese Communist Party goes to these countries and builds infrastructure. They build bridges, they build hospitals, they build roads, they build internet infrastructure, they build real estate, they build stadiums, they build all kinds of stuff. But then what happens? Chinese workers get the jobs, not the locals. So all the construction, Chinese companies doing the work. Then what happens? Chinese Chinese individuals get the jobs running the show, running those things, meaning it doesn't provide any local jobs. And then when the country defaults on it, because it's a debt trap, it's made so that you can't pay off the debt. It's designed in such a way where you're gonna basically, you're gonna have to file for bankruptcy essentially. Once they hit that point, they have to hand it over to the CCP. So the CCP takes full ownership of it. It's designed that way. It's built into the design. And so what happens is this. The Chinese Communist Party, through the exchange, they get access to natural resources. Timber, minerals, food, oil, they get all of it. They get jobs, they get construction, they get infrastructure, and they also get a certain degree of political influence and economic influence in the country. Now, imagine they don't just do that on one project. Imagine they do it on multiple projects throughout the country. What does that mean? They effectively turn these countries into puppet states because they control the economy, they control the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure in many cases, and because of that, they also have bribed a lot of officials, meaning they've bought off a lot of officials. And then also, if you control the business, you control a lot of the money, you can control the politics. This is how the Chinese Communist Party gains control over other countries without having to go to war. They create puppet states. A lot of countries in the world, as we speak, are puppet states of the Chinese Communist Party. They're not real countries, they're puppet states. Right? In the past, they would call them vassal states. And some people might say, yeah, art of war, it's more like a Machiavellian tactic, like the Prince Machiavelli, where, they talk about using a mafia to take over a country. The CCP is using more of a Machiavellian tactic of using organized crime as a tool of conquest. They're taking over countries like a mafia. Which is also why a lot of Chinese dissidents refer to the Chinese Communist Party as a mafia state. The CCP technically operates like a mafia. Like, if you really want to understand it, that's what they are. They're a mafia state. That's how they work. It's terrible. Alfred's mom is saying the CCP tried to take Panama. Now they are focused on Venezuela. Yeah, so I have a lot of good contacts in Panama because, when I was down in the Darien Gap, I was working with a lot of people down there. I get updates on what's happening there. So get this, all right? So the CCP has been doing, again, debt traps, Belt and Road operations throughout most of Latin America for a very long time. They've done this really heavily. Latin America, Africa, and most of Asia. The CCP controls many governments, puppet states, right? Puppet states in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They're trying to do it in other countries too. It's not as far along. It's not as far along in other places, but they're trying to do it. So Panama is an interesting case. So some people say the Chinese Communist Party is trying to take over the Panama Canal, kind of. The agreement the U.S. has over the Panama Canal it's kind of still under the U.S., but if its sovereignty is being undermined by a foreign adversary or foreign power, the U.S. can retake it. Trump threatened to initiate that. The CCP built bases on either side of it. The CCP also built an additional canal next to the main canal. And get this, right? A lot of mainstream media, a lot of the big corporate media, they've been saying that there's a drought and it's causing a water shortage in the Panama Canal. It is completely fake. That is total fake news. They're saying global warming is causing the Panama Canal to dry up. They're either lying to you or they're just reporting rumors because they don't go there and validate it themselves. This is what's actually happening. The Chinese Communist Party built the parallel canal, but they pull water from the canal the Americans built. So the canal the Americans built was not meant to support two canals, right? It was meant to support one canal. The new canal that the Chinese built, it pulls water from the American one, and it's not enough. And so you have a water shortage in the main canal because they're trying to fill 2 canals using one. That's what's happening. So get this too. When the Trump administration was sending officials down to Panama to go and investigate this stuff, some of my contacts down there were sending me photos and videos that local workers were sent out to cover up the Chinese signs because they had all these Chinese signs around the canal and stuff like that, like because the CCP has like a lot of control there. They covered it up before the Americans came. And so, as things stand now, it's changed quite a bit. Panama is now working very closely with the Trump administration, interestingly, including militarily. So I talked about Venezuela and deploying, the U.S. deploying the Navy to the Caribbean and stuff. It's actually bigger than that. The United States is also working with Panama to bring stability to Haiti. So with the gang uprising in Haiti, which, they were trying to overthrow the country, you had that guy named Barbecue because he barbecues and eats human beings. One of the gang leaders there taking over. The United States is trying to restabilize Haiti, but they're working with Panama to do it. So we're doing a policing operation, alongside Panama. So American cooperation with Panama is very good right now. And that's kind of where things are at. Panama and Costa Rica within Central America have been relatively more on the side of the United States, relatively speaking, right? And so that's kind of where things are at. Another question, Idaho Rocks, you're saying, when will the people of China kick out the CCP? Hopefully soon. I think they're already getting sick of it, and I think they have been for a while. I've been saying the Chinese Communist Party is not being propped up internally. It's being propped up externally. Internally, the CCP is very weak. Internally, a lot of the Chinese people do not support it. Internally, it's it's in a very difficult position. Economically, socially, terrible position. Social stability, terrible position. The strength of the CCP is not internal. The strength of the CCP is external. A lot of their power comes from foreign influence, and a lot of their money comes through foreign investment. Unfortunately, it is the case. The Chinese Communist Party has been largely propped up by foreign money. Money from U.S. investors, money from European investors. It's being propped up by businesses going to China. It's being propped up by all these butt-kissing media, frankly. Sorry, excuse my language. All these media that go over there and, kiss the ring of the CCP and, just cover up everything they do that's evil. A lot of it is being propped up by that. And also by Chinese Communist Party foreign influence, which is infiltrating and influencing foreign politics. Again, the stability and survival of the CCP is external. Internally, they could collapse any day. As soon as the external power systems collapse, I don't think anything's going to prop up the CCP anymore. Another question, Seymour Butts. You're saying the cartels do over $3 trillion in business every year. That puts them bigger than most countries in the world. Yeah, that's true. And of course, because they've been allowed to operate for so long. Okay, let's put it this way. I mentioned the cartels have a lot of control over politics throughout Latin America. The way a lot of that has happened is this. One of the main far-left bodies that controls politics throughout Latin America is called the Foro ao Sao Paulo, the Forum of Sao Paulo. That was a communist, socialist, and actually terrorist. For example, Shining Path was involved in it, as are some of the criminal organizations. The cartel, and not the cartel sense, Shining Path, right? The Foro ao Sao Paulo, or Forum of Sao Paulo, was operated between Cuba and Brazil, namely Castro and Lula, right? They established this, which started the quote-unquote pink wave throughout Latin America. That was like the 90s, when you had all the socialist presidential races, however the Banana Republic elections, let's call them, throughout Latin America. and very far-left governments took power all throughout Latin America. They call that the pink wave. That was facilitated by the Foro Sao Paulo, the Forum of Sao Paulo. That also allowed Cuba to influence the politics of all these countries using subversion. And one of the things they did after establishing these countries is because the gangs and the narco-terrorists were involved with this. And remember, even prior to Trump's designation of cartels as terrorist organizations, you actually did have many cartels that were also terrorist organizations previously. They call them narco-terror organizations, most of which were trained in China. They're Maoist, right? Maoist, CCP-trained communist front groups that operate as cartels throughout Latin America. What happened is this, though. The Foro Sao Paulo, they meet every year, and they decide kind of the overarching policies for all these far-left governments, these socialist and communist regimes. One thing they did was a policy on how to stop violence, how to stop cartel violence. And the decision they had was to effectively decriminalize drug trafficking. Decriminalize drug trafficking, which meant that the governments in many of these, not all of them, but in many of those countries, they basically decriminalized the cartels. When they decriminalized the cartels, it gave pseudo-legal status to the cartels, which allowed the cartels to gain a degree of political power. And so that's the situation in Latin America. The cartels, you go to parts of Latin America, they are the government. If you go to Eagle Pass in the Mexico side of it, when I was there, I was told there's no cartel here because the cartel is the government. If you go to certain parts of Mexico, the cartel is the government. They are the government, right? And this is how they do it. They run the hospitals, they run the social services, they call themselves like Robin Hood. And this is how they curry favor with like the local population. They want the local population to support them because they don't want to have, turf wars with vigilantes and stuff. And so they actually run a lot of the social services, fueled by this violent, terrorist type tactics. It's crazy. They operate very much like a terrorist group in like Afghanistan or Iraq. They operate a lot like the Taliban, where the Taliban was a terror group. The Taliban killed anybody who stood up against them, but the Taliban was also like kind of the government, right? The cartels operate in almost the exact same way in a lot of Latin America. And so again, Trump now talking about launching strikes to kill them, we'll see how he does it. My assumption with how Trump will carry out attacks in the cartels is he's not going to be blowing up like the cartel hospitals. I don't think he's going to be blowing up like the cartel government liaison organization or something like that. I think he's going to be targeting the grow operations, the financial hubs, the armaments, like the guys who do like the armor for the armored vehicles they have, the weapons caches and that stuff. I think he's going to go after the more conventional quote unquote military targets, not so much the social targets. And of course, people running the large-scale trafficking operations. I think they're going to be destroying those. And what you're going to find is this. The cartels are designated as terrorists, but they're motivated by a different thing than radical Islamist terrorists. While many terrorists are motivated by a political agenda or a religious agenda, and I'm talking like communist revolutionaries who are operating on a political spectrum, or religious extremist terrorists who are operating on a ideological level. The cartels, for the most part, they're financial. They're operating on a financial incentive, and so they're not going to be like, let's put it this way: destroy the money, you destroy the cartels, because that's the only thing motivating them. Destroy the money, you destroy the cartels, and I believe that's what Trump is going to do. I think they're going to be going after that side of it. But again, this is all speculation. But wait and see because I think I'm going to be right. So, all right, everyone, let me know what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think I'm on par with this, or do you think I'm far off? Let me know in the chat. Where do you think it's going to go? Do you think Trump is going to put his money where his mouth is and do what he said he's going to do? Does Trump ever do what he says he's going to do? Let me know in the chat. I want to hear your thoughts. That said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, for another great episode. Please don't forget to share this episode also. And also, if you're in San Diego or Orange County, be sure to come to my event. We're going to have a live Q&A and hang out. It's going to be the 24th and 25th, 24th in San Diego, 25th in Orange County. And again, that's epochsd.com, EPOCHSD, like San Diego.com. I'll see you all there, hopefully. And that said, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.